Hello everyone and welcome to Sarang Menon Academy. Now if you want to start programming, then Python is the best place to start. It's simple, beginner friendly, and yet it's so powerful that it's been used in companies such as Google, Netflix, and NASA. Now before we learn Python and start coding, we need to set up its environment. Now in this video, I'll walk you through the entire process of setting your Python programming language and writing your first Python code. So let's get started. Now, first of all, in order to install Python, we need to first install Python from the official Python website. So let's search for python.org, then click on downloads, and then click on this download Python version, whichever version it specifies. And then the download automatically gets downloaded into our system. Now, since Python is already installed in my system, I'm not going to reinstall it. But the installation steps are very simple. You have to just click on this installer and then click on install now, and then you need to check this checkbox, add python.exe to path, and then click install now, and then Python will get installed in your computer. Now after installing Python, you need to install an IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Developer Environment. Now what is an IDE? Basically, IDE is a place where you can write and run code. Now for this video, we are going to install Visual Studio Code. So in order to install Visual Studio Code, we need to search for code.visualstudio.com and then hit enter. And based on your operating system, this button will change. Since I am using Windows, it's showing download for Windows. Now if you are using another operating system such as Mac OS, Linux, etc., it will show download for Mac OS and so on. Now click on download for Windows and then it will start downloading. Now again, Visual Studio Code is already installed on my computer, so I'm not going to reinstall it. But the download process of Visual Studio Code is pretty straightforward. You need to just open the installer once it gets downloaded and then hit download. Then it will get downloaded in your computer. Now once you downloaded Visual Studio Code, the next step is to write our first Python program. So in order to write your first Python program, you need to search for Visual Studio Code and then create a folder. Now let's create a new folder. Let's go to File Explorer, create a new folder. Let's name it as Python Basics or Python Beginner Level. And then hit enter. Now close your File Explorer and then in Visual Studio Code, click on File, click on Open Folder, and then select this folder, Python Beginner Level. And then you need to install an extension on Visual Studio Code to run Python files. Now, in order to install extension, you need to click on this icon which shows some blocks. This is the section for installing extensions. Now click on it and search for Python. And then download this extension which simply says Python from Microsoft. Now since this extension is already installed on my computer, it shows uninstalled. But on your system, it will show install. Just click on install and it will get installed in your system. Now once you have installed this extension, we need to create a first Python file. Now in order to create a file in Visual Studio Code, you need to click on this icon, the very first icon right next to Python Beginner Level. Now click on it and then let's name a file. So I'll name my file as program.py. And why are we using this .py? Basically, .py is the file extension for Python files. Just like we have .xlsx for Excel, .docx for Word, we have .py for Python. Now, once you've created the file, hit enter and you will see this blank screen. Now, this is the place where you will write your code. Now, the first program we are going to write in Python is to display something on our screen. Now, many times you might have noticed that whenever we visit a website or an app, so many texts are being displayed on the screen, such as hello Sarang or welcome to a platform, login, sign up. So there are many various texts which would be displayed on the screen. Now, today, the first program that we are going to write is to display text on a screen. So in order to display anything on a screen in Python, we use the command or let's say function print. So we just simply write print, print, and then open parentheses. Now parentheses are these brackets. These brackets are known as parentheses. And then inside it, we'll open two double quotes. And then inside it, we'll write hello world. Hello world. Now what's this hello world? This hello world is actually a simple text, which is actually the basic text that we print in Python or in any other language for the first time. Basically, in most of the languages, we start with printing hello world because it's just a random text which we use to learn how to print something on a particular programming language. Now, once you have written this, in order to run this code, you need to click on this icon. Now, this icon, which looks similar to the YouTube's play icon. So just click on it. And as you can see, it successfully displays hello world. Now, in a similar way, I can print anything. If I want to print my own name, Sarang Menon, I'll just write print Sarang Menon and then click on run. As you can see, it has printed both hello world and Sarang Menon. Now, this is how you print something on Python. And you have successfully written your first line of code in Python. We'll be exploring variables and data types in Python. So what are variables? Variables are basically data containers in which we store some values. For example, suppose we have some mangoes and we need to store those mangoes inside a box. So in this example, the box acts as a variable and mangoes are the values. Similarly, in programming, we store some values inside variables. And like the name says, variables, the values inside variables can vary, which means I can change the values inside variables. For example, if I have stored the number 5 inside a variable called x, and in the next line, I can change the value of the variable x from 5 to 7. And if I print the variable x, the value would be shown as 7 instead of 5. Now let's go to VS Code and let's create a new file. Let's name it as variables.py. And in order to create a variable in Python, we simply write the variable name followed by an equal to and then the value. For example, if I want to create a variable x, I'll write x, then I'll put an equal to sign, then I'll write the value. If I want to store the value number 1, I'll write 1. And then if I want to print the value inside x, which is 1, I'll write print. And then inside parentheses, I'll write x. And if I run the code, it will show 1. Now similarly, if I want to create another variable called y, and inside it I'll store the value 3, and if I print y, it will print 1 and 3. As you can see, this is how we store some values inside variables and print them in Python. Now, apart from numbers, I can also store words also in variables or even letters. Let's suppose if I want to store any particular country as a variable in Python, I can create a variable called country, and inside it I can write India. Inside double quotations I have to write India. And then if I print country, it will print India. Now if I print, as you can see, I'm getting 1, 3 and India. Now in a similar way, I can create a variable which stores decimal values. If I create a variable called decimal, and then inside it I store 1.5, and then if I print decimal, it will print 1.5. As you can see, it prints 1.5. Now we have discussed about variables. Now what are data types? Now coming back to our previous example which I took of the example of mangoes. Now mangoes are a fruit. Now if I give you carrot, which is a vegetable, you will store the carrot in another box. You will not store both mangoes and carrots in a single box. And if you visit a supermarket, you would find various sections such as fruits and vegetables, meat, cosmetics, luggage, etc. That means each category has items which falls on that particular category. If I go to the category of fruits and vegetables, I will only find items which are fruits and vegetables. And if I go and visit a category which is for luggage, I will only see products which are luggage. Similarly, data types are the categories inside Python or any other programming language. Now, now there are many data types in Python, but primarily there are 4 data types in Python which are most important and which we use 90% of time. We only use those 4 data types. Now, which are those 4 data types? Those 4 data types are integer, float, string, and boolean. Now, integers are the numbers which contain whole numbers, natural numbers, and zero. For example, both the values inside x and y are integer. Now, if I want to create another variable called z, and if I store a number called -1, and if I print z, and if I run the code, as you can see, it prints -1 because -1 is an integer. Now, in a similar way, if I want to store decimal numbers, because as you know, decimals are not included inside integers. So if I want to store decimal numbers in Python, we have another data type called float. Now float is a data type that is used to store decimal numbers. Now I have created a variable called country and I have stored the value India. Now India is neither an integer nor a decimal number. Now India is a word. Now, in order to store any letter or word in Python, there's a data type called string. So, string is a data type that stores a string of characters. Now, the 4th data type is Boolean. Now, in Boolean, there are only 2 values. Now, which are those 2 values? Those 2 values are true and false. Now, you might be wondering why would we use Boolean value? Because true and false. We use Boolean values for checking conditions. Now, in later part of this playlist, I'll walk you through the concept of conditional statements wherein we will use Boolean a lot because true and false are the most important values when writing conditional statements. Now, whenever we write a value which is a Boolean value, which are true and false, we write it as the first letter of the word as capital. If I create a variable called Boolean value, and then if I want to store the value true, I will write true like this. I can't write true as small t or everything in caps. It will not work. Similar way, for false, I have to write it as false with F capital. Was Boolean false equal to false. Now there are some naming conventions in Python for naming a variable. Now what are those naming conventions? Those naming conventions are that we can't start a variable with any special character or numbers. But there's an exception for special characters. We can only name a variable starting with underscore. That is the only exception while naming while naming the variable the start character for a special character. The only exception that is present is underscore. We can start a variable in Python with underscore. For example, if I create a variable called, let's say, underscore example, and if I store a value called 2, and then if I print underscore example, and if I run my code, as you can see, it prints 2. Whereas if I try to create a variable with, let's take percentage value. As you can see, as soon as I write percentage, a red line appears on my IDE. Now this red line indicates that there is an error. But if I replace this percentage with underscore, the red line is gone. Now this indicates that we can use an underscore in the start of the variable, but we can't use any other special characters. Similarly, we can't start a variable in Python with numbers. We can start with alphabets and underscores. But of course, we can include numbers at in the middle or at the end in a variable. For example, if I want to create a variable called example1 is equal to 3. And if I print example1 and run the code, it prints 3. Whereas if I try to create a variable with one example, as you can see, instantly it throws an error. So we can include numbers but not at the start. Now, in variables, we can perform arithmetic operations. Now, there are many arithmetic operations, but in this video, I'm going to cover only the 4 fundamental arithmetic operations, which are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Now, how to add two variables, how to subtract two variables, how to multiply two variables, and how to divide two variables. Not only two, we can multiply infinite number of variables. We can perform arithmetic operations on infinite number of variables. Now, let's take an example. I have already created two variables, x and y. Now, if I want to add them, that means 1 plus 3. I should get the answer as 4. Now, how do I add two variables? In order to add two variables, there are two methods. The first method is to directly print x plus y and then run the code. As you can see, the answer comes as 4. Now, the second way is to create another variable and store the values of x plus y inside it. Now, if I create a variable called sum and inside it I'll store x plus y, and then I print sum and run the code, it will also print 4. Now, in a similar way, I can perform subtraction, multiplication, division. If I write print x minus y, let's group these statements together for better readability. And then I write difference is equal to x minus y, and then print difference, and then print x multiplied by y, then create a variable called product, then create and print division, then create another variable called quotient wherein I divide it, and then print product and quotient. And then if I run the code, as you can see, all of this works. And this is how you can perform the 4 fundamental arithmetic operations in Python using variables. Now there is another concept which is called comments. Now what are comments? Now comments are those lines in any programming language, not only in Python, in any programming language, comments are those lines which are ignored by the system. Now what that means? It means that whenever we write some comment, the system will completely ignore that comment and will not execute that line. Comments are meant for humans. It is created to ensure better readability for the code. Now, how to create a comment in Python? In order to create a comment in Python, we put a hashtag. We put hash, and then whatever I write after hash is a comment. If I write hash, let's say variables, and if I execute the code, it will not print variables nor throw me an error. So you can see no error is being thrown because the system has completely ignored that comment. Now I can put place comment anywhere. I can place comment over here. For example, I can write that these are integers. This is a float. This is a float. This is integer. This is a string. And these are boolean. And then here I can write 4 fundamental arithmetic operations. So these lines would be completely ignored by the system. Now this is how you add comments in Python. Now the next part is joining of a string and a variable. Now how do we join a string and a variable? Now as you know, string means a string of characters. So if I want to join a string and a variable, that means right now I have printed these values in the output section as it is. Now this does not look good because I'm finding it difficult to identify this answer is for which part. Is this for addition? Is this for division? Etc. So what if I could add a text and then I could put a hyphen or any separator and then give the value. Then it would be easier to read. So that is known as concatenation. The concatenation means we join two things. Now, how do we concatenate two things? Now, I have already printed these 4 fundamental arithmetic operations. So I'll perform concatenation here itself. I can put a hash and instead the command I'll write performing concatenation. And then I put a string, then I write addition, then I put a separator, then I put a space and then put plus, And then if I ask it is if I write, and then if I run the code, it will throw me an error. Now what is the error that it's been thrown? Can only concatenate str, not int to str. Now what this means? It's written, something is written like can only concatenate str, not int to str. Now this str means string. Str is the short form for string, and int is the short form for integer. Now this means Python is telling us that it can only concatenate strings and not an integer to string. Now this means concatenation means we join up two strings. But as you know that x plus y is not a string, it's an integer. X is an integer, y is an integer. Now how do I print and concatenate x plus y? In order to concatenate an integer to a string, we use a method called typecasting. Now what does typecasting means? Typecasting is nothing but conversion of one data type to another. I can convert string to integer, string to float, float to integer, integer to boolean. Like that I can convert one data type to another. That is known as typecasting. Now how do we typecast? Basically before the value, we need to specify to which data type do I need to typecast. Now since I want to convert integer to string, I will write str. Str is the short form of in string. And then I put opening and closing brackets. And now if I run the code, as you can see, it has printed addition 4. That means concatenation has worked successfully. Now in a similar way, I can write subtraction, multiplication, and division. And if I run the code, it has printed these four fundamental arithmetic operations. Now we don't need to typecast if we are concatenating two strings. Typecasting is only required when we are converting one data type to another data type. And in concatenation, except for strings, all other data types we need to concatenate. And in order to concatenate them, we need to typecast them from one data type to another data type. Now let's check how to concatenate a string. How to concatenate a string. Now in order to concatenate a string, let's take print and then my name is and see. And if I put plus and if I put my original name, Sarang Menon, and if I print it, as you can see, it has printed my name is Sarang Menon without any requirement for typecasting because my name is a string and Sarang Menon is also a string. In a similar manner, we have already created a variable called country. So I'll show you how to concatenate a string variable to a normal string. I can write country and then plus country. Now don't be confused. This country is the string and this is the variable that we had created earlier. This variable. And then if I print, as you can see, it prints country India. Now here, no typecasting is required. Now this is how we perform concatenation between two strings. We'll be exploring how to take input from the user. Now by taking input from the user, we'll make our program interactive. Means users can also interact with the system and then the system will answer those queries or the response which has been given by the user in real time. So let's get started. Let's go to VS Code. Then let's create a new file. Let's name it as userinput.py. And then in order to collect input from the user, we'll use a function called input. Now we'll write input, then open parentheses, then inside it we'll write, let's say, enter your nationality or enter your favorite food. Enter your favorite food. And let's put a separator and we'll put a space. Now, why are we putting space? Now, by putting space, we ensure that the user's response is clearly visible to the system and to the user. Now, let's first run this command itself and let's see what the system throws us as the output. As you can see, it asks, enter your favorite food. Now, if I enter my favorite food, let's say idli, and hit enter, as you can see, the program terminated. The moment I entered my favorite food, it is not giving me any response. Now, the next step that we'll learn is to make our system respond to the user's response which has been given by the user. Now, let's add a print statement. And then inside print, I'll write your favorite food is. And then by concatenation, I'll first put this inside a variable called fav food, and then I'll write here plus fav food. Now this is concatenation. I have concatenated this variable with this string, and now let's print. Now once I have executed the code, enter your favorite food, I'll write idli, and as you can see, it has written your favorite food is idli. Now this is how we make our program respond to the response which has been given by the user. Now this is for string. As you can see, enter your favorite food. This is a string. But suppose I need to ask the user for his or her age or their favorite number or any decimal number or any use case I need where I need to ask the user for an integer input. Then I can't use this command. Why? Let's try. If I could create a variable called number, then I write input, enter a number, and then let me just print number plus number. And let's see if it works or not. Let's run. As you can see, it asks for entering my favorite food. I have entered and it asks for a number. Let me enter a number called 5. Now, as you can see, it has given me the result correctly, number 5. But here, this 5 is not treated as an integer. This is treated as a string. Now, how do we know if it has been treated as an integer? We have a specific command or a function in Python which tells us the data type of a variable. So if I write print and write type, then I write number, and then if I execute, let me give the answers. As you can see, number it has written 5 is a string. Str means string. That means this 5 is not an integer. This is a string. So while our Python program is taking input and giving me the output, but it's considering 5 as a string, not as an integer. Now you might be wondering, it doesn't make any difference when the program considers it as an integer or a string. We are getting the output, but it's not, because in this type of use cases, yes, it doesn't make any difference. But if we want to perform some arithmetic operations, or we need to check condition where some exact criteria of a number or an integer should match, then this would fail because this is treating it as a string, not an integer. Now, how will we make our program treat it as an integer? I'll before input, I'll write int and then open parenthesis and then close the parenthesis. And now since it's since it's an integer, I need to typecast it. So in order to typecast it, I'll write str and then I'll write the variable name number. Now if I run the code, let me enter my favorite food. Let me enter a number. As you can see, now it has written class int. That means it is an integer. Now Python is treating our number as an integer. Now in a similar manner, to take input as a float, I can write decimal number that is equal to, instead of int, I'll write float, then input, and then enter a decimal number, and then print. Let's print the type of decimal number. And then let's execute our code. As you can see, this is treating it as class float. Now now by using this type function, we can get the data type of anything. We can get the data type of a data structure, which we learn in later videos. We can get data type of variables of a particular object that we have created. So we can get the data type of anything in Python using the type function which we have used. Now let's create a project. Now let's create a new file and then let's create a project called personal, or let's create it as favorite things.py. Now in this project, basically it's a mini project. Now in this mini project, we'll collect the input from the user about his or her favorite color, favorite food, favorite movie, favorite TV show, favorite place, favorite country, etc. So basically, this project will collect information from the user about their favorite things. Now let's write print. Welcome to favorite things diary. Let's say this is a diary. Now this is a normal print statement, which means I have printed this text to the screen so that the user knows that this is a favorite things diary where I can note down my favorite thing. And then I can write favorite, let's say favorite city is equal to input. What is your favorite city? And then leave a space. And then favorite color, input. What is your favorite color? Then favorite, let's take favorite monument equal to input. What is your favorite monument? Then favorite pet, input. What is your favorite pet? Then for the integer part, we can collect favorite number, int input. What is your favorite number? Again, we are using int because it is collecting an integer input, not a string input. And then we'll print everything. So we'll print your favorite things. And then And then let's print favorite city, which would be printed with concatenation. Favorite color, then it will be monument. Now pet, and then favorite number. The favorite number would be typecasted because since it's an integer, and then we'll print everything. Now as you can see, it prints the greeting message, welcome to Favorite Things Diary. Now what is your favorite city? I'll enter my favorite city as, let's take Mumbai. What's your favorite color? Green. What's your favorite monument? I'll take as my favorite monument, let's say Agra Fort. What's your favorite pet? Dog. What is your favorite number? I'll just enter random number 1. And then as you can see, it prints my favorite things. City, color, monument, pet, number. Now in the similar manner, we can create many things such as favorite movie collector, or inside this favorite things file itself, we can let the user, we can ask the user to enter his or her favorite movie, favorite personality. We can ask many things from the user. Now this was a mini project. I hope you all got an thorough understanding of how do we use user input to collect information from user and display it in a clean order. Now in later when we move to build actual real world projects in Python, we would actually need to use user input a lot, because we many times we would uh, face a situation where we need to collect information from the user, whether it be authentication where we need to collect information such as username, password, email ID, etc. from the user, or or a memo application where users can note down the things. So in those all projects, we need to collect information from the user. We'll be exploring conditional statements in Python. So let's get started. Let's open our VS Code and let's create a new file called conditionalstatement.py. So before we start coding, what exactly are conditional statements? Basically, conditional statements are those statements that are used to check some conditions. For example, for driving license eligibility checker, or for voting eligibility checker, or for anything that we need to check some criteria or some condition we need to check, we use conditional statements. Now it could be for age verification or for eligibility checker for some scheme or any other product. It could be anything. So basically in Python, we use if, elif, and else. These are the three keywords that we use in conditional statements. Now the if keyword is used to define the main condition, and then we check whether the condition is met or not. The elif keyword is used when we have more conditions to check inside the same condition. And the else statement is used to display or to satisfy when the condition is not met. So let's do implement it practically. So we'll be building a voting eligibility checker and we'll use conditional statements in it. So in order to build the voting eligibility checker, we'll print a greeting message. Welcome to voting eligibility checker. And then now we'll be taking input from the user. So in order to take input from the user, I'll create a variable. So in order to check voting eligibility, we'll use age. So I'll create a variable called age. Age is equal to, again, as age is an integer, we'll specify int, and then inside int we'll open the parenthesis and we'll give the input function, and then inside input I'll write enter your age, then put a separator and put a space, and then now we'll start using conditional statements. So we'll write if, and then after if we specify our condition. So in order to be eligible for voting, a person must be at least 18 years old. So our condition should be if age is greater than or equal to 18. Now why greater than or equal to 18? Because when a person is 18, he or she can vote. And if his or her age is greater than 18, then also they can vote. So our condition should be that age should be greater than or equal to 18. So let's write if age greater than or equal to, then I'll write 18, and then we'll put a colon, and then we hit enter. Now as soon as we hit enter, you can notice that some space is being created automatically. Now this space is known as indentation. Now these spaces are automatically created by the Python interpreter. So indentation basically creates nested statements inside a conditional statement or a loop or any statement that we create. Now what are nested statements? Nested statements are statements which we use under the main statement. Basically they are all are interrelated statements. Those statements are related with each other. So the next line which we'll write will be related to the if statement that we have created. So that's why it automatically creates an indentation. So now we can write print if the person is 18 or greater than 18, then we'll print congratulations, you are eligible to vote. You are eligible to vote. And what if the person is not 18 or greater than 18? He or she is below 18. Then we'll write else. We write else. Then put a colon. Then we hit enter. Again indentation comes. And then we'll print, sorry, you are not eligible to vote. You are not eligible to vote. And now if we run our code, as you can see, it prints the welcome message and then it asks me to enter my age. So I'll enter my age. And as you can see, it shows, sorry, you are not eligible to vote. Now if I enter an age which is greater than or equal to 18, it will print, congratulations, you are eligible to vote. So we'll check that also. So let me enter a random age which is greater than 18. Let's say I write 40. As you can see, when I enter 40, it specifies that congratulations, you are eligible to vote. So that means our condition is working successfully. Now, apart from this if and else statement in voting eligibility checker, we also have one more condition that needs to be met. Now, what is that condition? That condition is that we have already specified that in order to be eligible to vote, a person must be at least 18 years old. And if he or she is less than 18, then we'll write you are not eligible to vote. But what if a person enters age less than 0? Because no age exists like -1 or -2 or -50. That means that's not a valid age. So what if a person enters an age which is not valid? Then also our system will not display the exact error message that you have to enter a valid age. Why? Because the system does not know. Because we haven't programmed our system to identify that it's an invalid age and to throw an error to the user. So we'll use an elif statement. And like I mentioned earlier, that elif statement is used when we need to check multiple conditions which are related. So we write elif statement after the if statement, but before the else statement. So that means after if I hit enter and then I write elif, then I write age is less than 0 and then I press enter and then I can print enter a valid age. So basically elif statement, the syntax of the elif statement is mostly similar to if statement. The only thing is that it's written before the else statement and after the if statement, and we write elif instead of if. Otherwise, all other syntaxes of elif statement match exactly with the if statement. Now, if I run the code and if I enter my age, suppose -80, as you can see, the moment when I entered -80, it throws me an error, enter a valid age. That means our system is now able to check that whether an age is valid or invalid. So this is how we create condition statements in Python. We'll be exploring lists in Python. So let's get started. Let's go to Visual Studio Code. Let's create a new file and let's name it as lists.py. Now, what are lists? Now, if someone tells you to create a variable that stores mango, you can easily create it by naming fruit equal to mango or fruit1 equal to mango. And you can create many variables like fruit2 equal to apple, fruit3 equal to pineapple, and so on. But if someone tells you to create and store 100 fruits, you can create 100 variables, but it would be a tedious process. So for that, in Python we have lists. List means we store multiple items inside a single list. In real world example, we use shopping list to store items which we need to buy. For example, we need to buy carrots, apples, bread, butter, and so on. In the similar way, in Python, we create list. We create a name for the list and then we store items inside the list. And then whenever we want to access a specific item in a list, we can do it by indexing. So first of all, let's learn how to create a list in Python. So creating a list in Python is very similar to creating a variable in Python. First of all, we need to name our list. So let's create a shopping list. So I'll write shopping list. Then we put an equal to sign. But before adding items inside a list, we put a square bracket. Now inside this square bracket, we add things and we separate it by comma. Now if I add mango, then I put comma, then carrot, then pineapple, bread, butter, and so on. Now I have created a list, a shopping list, and I have stored 5 items inside it. Now if I want to access a specific item inside the list, let's say I want to print carrot. Then we use a concept called indexing. Indexing means to index something and find it for us in Python. Now the first value of index starts from 0, not from 1. because programming languages like Python starts their indexing from 0 and not from 1. They started from whole numbers and not from natural numbers. So whenever we want to index the first item of a list, we need to index it by 0. So in order to index something in Python and print it for us, we write print. Then inside parenthesis, I write the name of the list, which is shopping list. And then I put a square bracket. And inside the square bracket, I will write the index range which I want. So in this case, I want to print the first item on the list, which is mango. So I'll write 0 and then I'll run my code. As you can see, it prints mango. In the similar way, if I want to print carrot, I'll write print shopping list inside square brackets 1. It prints both mango and carrot. Now lists are mutable, which means I can add or remove. Which means I can edit anything in shopping list anytime. So there are some specific methods in list which can be helpful to add, remove, or to index some things in list. Now, what are those methods? The first method is append. Now, in append, whenever we add some value inside the append method, it automatically adds it at the end of the list. Now, in order to append something, I have to first write the name of the list, which is shopping list, and then I have to write dot append, and then I put parenthesis, and then I specify what I want to append. If I want to add, let's say, luggage, I add luggage, and then if I want to print the last item of the list, again there is another index range for printing the last item of a list. Instead of counting it from 0, in order to access anything from the end, we can start from -1. So if I write -1, I'll get the last item, which should be luggage. If I run my code, as you can see, it prints mango, carrot, and luggage. And if I want to print the second last item in a list, I can print it by specifying the value -2. Now it will print butter. Now after append, the second method in Python to add a thing in Python is insert. Now if both append and insert adds things in a list, then what's the difference between them? The difference between append and insert is that append adds the item at the end of the list, whereas in insert, I can specify at which place should the item be added. If I want to add it at the end, I will specify -1. If I want to add it at the beginning, I will write 0, or in the middle, I'll specify the appropriate index value. So in order to index something and insert it, I write shopping list dot insert. Then I specify the value, the index range where I want to insert the item. If I want to insert it at the beginning, I'll write 0. Then I'll separate it by comma. And then I specify the item which I want to add. If I want to add strawberry, I write strawberry. And then if I print the first thing in the list now and run it, as you can see, it prints strawberry. That means Python has inserted strawberry as the first value in the list. Now these are the methods to add things in a list. Now we'll explore the methods of removing some things in a list. So in order to remove something in a list, we have a method called pop. Now pop automatically removes the last item of a list. We don't need to specify which item we need to delete. It automatically deletes the last item in the list. If I want to delete the last item in the list, which is currently luggage, I write shopping list, which is my list name, dot pop, then open parenthesis, and it will automatically remove the last item in the list. Now, if I want to print the last item in the list, I can write -1, and it will now print butter instead of luggage. As you can see, now it prints butter. That means the last item in the list, luggage, has been removed. Now, similarly, we have another method to remove something in a list, which is the remove method. If I write shopping list dot remove, and if I want to remove pineapple, I write pineapple. Now, pineapple is the second item in the list. Now, if I print the second item in the list, print shopping list 2, it will remove pineapple and it has printed carrot. That means Python has removed pineapple from our list. Now the main difference between pop and remove is that pop automatically removes the last item from the list, whereas in remove method, we can specify which item we need to remove from the list. We don't need to specify the index range of the item. We just need to mention which item we need to delete. And now we have stored everything. Now everything in this list till now which we have stored is in the data type of string. But we can store multiple data types in a single list. Let's try to insert an item of the data type integer. So I want to insert something. I'll write shopping list dot append. I'll append it at the last item. So I'll write append. Then I'll append, let's say 1. And then if I print shopping list, I need to print the last value. So I'll print -1. And if I run the code, as you can see now it has printed 1. That means in my shopping list, which contained only items which was of string data type, now also contains an item of another data type which is integer. That proves that list can store values of multiple data types. Now in a similar way, I can store items of float data type, of boolean data type. I can store values of multiple data types in a single list. Now similarly, we can create a second list. Let's say to-do list. To-do list, and inside to-do list I can add things such as completing my assignment, attending an online meeting. So currently I'm just storing these two values inside this list. And if I try to only print the list name without specifying any index value, it prints the entire list. So you can see it prints the entire items inside the list. That means if I want to print the entire items inside a specific list without mentioning the range, I can just simply print it by mentioning the list name. Now list is a data structure in Python. Now there are many data structures in Python apart from lists, which are tuple, dictionary, and set. We are going to explore what are loops and functions in Python. So let's get started. Let's first open Visual Studio Code and let's create a new file and let's name it as loops.py. So basically, what are loops? Loops are the lines of code that we write and we that can run a repetitive task. For example, if I ask you to print numbers from 1 to 10, you can print 1, print 2, and so on till print 10. But if I tell you to print numbers from 1 to 100, you can print numbers from 1 to 100, like print 1, print 2, like this, until print 100. But wouldn't that be a tedious task and also time consuming task? So that's where loops come into play. In loop, I can define that I need to print numbers from 1 to 100 and then print that numbers. And then if I run the code, it will automatically print numbers from 1 to 100. Not only for printing numbers, for repeating any type of task, we can use loops. Now, there are two types of loops in Python. The first type of loop is for loop, and the second one is while loop. Now, we use for loop when the number of repetitions here is known as iterations. So, we use for loop when the number of iterations are known to us. For example, if I want to print numbers from 1 to 10, I know the number of iterations that I need to start from 1 and end till 10. And we use while loop when the number of iterations are unknown. For example, if I want to satisfy a specific condition where the number of iterations are unknown to me, I'll use while loop. So this is the major difference between for loop and while loop. Now, in order to now let's implement for loop. So I'll just create a command called for loop, and then in order to create a for loop, I'll write for. Now this is the keyword. Then I. Now I is the variable. Here I can give any variable. If suppose I can give A or B, any variable I can give, but generally people prefer to start from I, and then if I want to create multiple for loops inside the same program, people go on from the letters after I, such as J, K, L, M, and so on. So I'll also use I. So I'll write I, then I'll write in. That means I is in this for loop. Then I'll add range. Now, and then I'll open parenthesis. Now here, range means the number of iterations that I want. From which number to which and till which number I need the for loop to run. So in this case, I need to start my for loop from 1 until 10. But in Python, when we are specifying range, we need to, instead of giving 10, I need to give 11. Then only it will consider till 10. I need to give a number which is after 10, which is 11, in order the Python to understand that it needs to print numbers from 1 to 10. Now why am I not printing or writing just 11? Because if I simply write 11, for loop will work, but it will print numbers from 0 to 10. Now why 0 to 10? Because in the previous video, I've already explained that the concept of indexing. So the index range starts from 0 in Python. Not only in Python, in most of the programming language, the index range starts from 0. So here also, if I write simply 11, it will print numbers from 0 to 10. But here I want to print numbers from 1 to 10. So I'll write 1 comma 11. Then I'll put colon and then indentation will come. And here I'll write print I. Now if I run the code, as you can see, it prints numbers from 1 to 10. This is the for loop. It will print number from 1 to 10. Now this is how for loop works. Now in the similar manner, I can create while loop. So let's create a new file and let's name it as while loop.py. Now like I said earlier, in while loop, then we use while loop when the number of iterations are unknown. And while loop continuously run until the condition that we have given becomes false. And there might be some cases where the condition does not um, meet where the condition does not gets false. Means the condition is continuing, keep on continuing, getting satisfying to true, and it doesn't become false. That is known as the infinite loop. Now, in for loop, there is no concept called infinite loop because the number of iterations are known and we specify. But in while loop, there is a concept called infinite loop where the condition never becomes false. So while programming, we need to keep in mind that there is a concept called infinite loop while using while loop. So we need to satisfy a condition, set the condition to, in a way that it doesn't become an infinite loop. Now in while loop, I need to specify the variable or declare the variable before the start of the loop. In for loop, we had specified it inside the loop. But in while loop, we'll specify it outside the loop. So I need to create the variable I. So I'll let I equal to 1. And then I'll write while. Then I'll specify the condition I less than 11, or let's say less than 10. Now it will print numbers till 9 only. And if I write I, print I, then I write I equal to I plus 1. Now why am I writing I equal to I plus 1? This means that whenever the I is getting printed, that means the number is getting printed, the next iteration when it comes, it should add one more number to it. Like 1 plus 1 would be 2. So the next number would be 2. 2 plus 1 would be 3. So the next number would be 3. And so on. Like that. So if I run the code, as you can see, it prints the number from 1 to 9. But if I want to print the number till 10, like I said before, I need to write I less than 11. So it prints number from 1 to 10. But if I write I less than or equal to 10, now the number would print from 1 to 10. This concept is not there in for loop. We can't specify for loop like in range I less than or equal to 10. In while loop, but yes, we can specify. So in while loop, there is no concept of range like we specify the range from 1 to 11. If I want to print numbers till 10, I can directly write I less than equal to 10. But in for loop, I need to give a number which is after the number which I want to run. That means if I want to run till 10, I need to specify till 11. So this is the concept of for loop and while loop. These are the primary type of loops in Python. Now the second topic that we are going to learn in this video is functions. Now in mathematics, you have probably heard of functions, fnx like that. Now in programming also there is a concept called functions. So let's create a new file and let's name it as functions.py. Now what are functions? Basically functions are it's actually a mini program inside the main program, which means inside a main program, if I need to create a particular program, mini program that needs to be reused in another scenario in the same program, I can use functions. For example, if I want to create a function that adds two numbers, and then if I want to reuse that same function in the later part of the program, I need to add two numbers or add three numbers. I'll again call the same function. So that means I don't need to write the same line of code again and again, like print x plus y, print x plus y, x equal to 1, y equal to 2. I can just call the function once again. So functions are basically the reusable components that we create in a program in programming. So in order to create a function in Python, we'll write def. Now def stands for define. So that means we are defining a function. So I'll write def. Then I'll write the name of the function. So the name of function here is that we are going to create a function that adds two numbers. So I'll name the function as add, and then I'll put a colon. And before putting colon, I need to open parentheses. That means that this is a function. Now without parentheses, if we try to create the function, it will result in an error. So we need to always put parentheses and then we need to give colon. And then if I press enter, And now if I write, let's say x is equal to 1, y equal to 2, print x plus y. This I have already created this function. Now in the later part, now I have come out of this function. Now, as you can see, I have come out of this function because there is no space here. That means the indentation is not present. That means I have successfully come out of the function. Now here, if I want to use the function, I have to write the function name and then the parenthesis. I have to specify these two things, the function name and parenthesis. And then if I run the code, as you can see, it will print 3. Now in later part of this code, if I print something else, if I print, let's say if I print something else like welcome, and then if I want to again use this function, I'll just again call this function. And as you can see, it's being reused. This is the purpose of using functions. Now there is another concept inside functions itself, which is known as parameters and arguments. Now let me explain this concept by creating another function. Now let's create a function which subtracts two numbers. So I'll write define def subtract, open parenthesis and put colon. Now parameters are the variables that we give inside the function, which means I'll not specify here like this, like x equal to 1, y equal to 2. The moment when I need to call this function, that time I'll specify the numbers. Now, how this is useful is that at times it's not necessary that every time I need to add or subtract 1 and 2. Because in this function, I have predefined that x is 1 and y is 2. So whenever I call the function, I will only get the answer as 3. I cannot change the numbers. If I want to change the numbers, I need to modify the entire function. But by using parameters and arguments, I'll specify n number of variables here, and those variables are known as parameters, and then I'll write what those variables will do. If I write two variables a and b, and if I press enter, and then if I write print a minus b, and then if I come out of the function, and then if I need to call this function, I'll write subtract, and then I'll put parentheses. But here I will give two numbers. Now why two numbers? Because these two numbers are the actual values of a and b. So if I want to subtract 5 minus 1, I'll add 5, then I'll add comma 1. Now this is 5 minus 1. Now if I run this code, as you can see, it prints 4. Now again, if I want to call this function, and this time I need to subtract 4 and 3, I'll add 4 comma 3. And if I run the code, as you can see, the 4 stays as it is in the previous call, and this time it generates 1. Now these two numbers that we give here, which is 5 and 1 and 4 and 3, these are known as arguments. So parameters are the variables basically, and arguments are the values that we give. So this is useful because many times I need to calculate different numbers. So by using parameters and arguments, I can specify different numbers that I want, which in a normal function which we had treated earlier is rigid and it's not flexible. Which means I can only define the numbers which I've already specified in function and cannot change the numbers. For each use case, for each time when I call the function, I cannot change the numbers. So this is where parameters and arguments are very helpful. And now there is a challenge question. The challenge question is that you need to create a function which multiplies and another function which divides. Now it can be two numbers, three numbers, it can be n number of numbers. That's your wish. And do paste the code in the comment section below. We'll be exploring exception handling in Python. So let's get started. Let's open Visual Studio Code and let's create a new file and name it as exception handling. Now, what is exception handling? Exception handling is basically handling exceptions, which means errors. Now, many times when we know that if a certain error will come, it could be an error where a user has entered a string instead of an integer, or a division has been done with zero. We know that errors will come definitely. So instead of throwing that entire error message like in line one, in this line, in this point, this type of error has occurred, we can throw a custom error message that the user will see. Like you have entered a string, kindly enter an integer. Like that, we can define a custom error message which will be shown to the user. So first of all, let's create a function that divides two numbers. And in this video, we'll be looking how to handle exceptions by using the example of division by zero. So let's create a function and let's name it as divide. And inside the function, I'll give x equal to 5, y equal to 0. And if I divide x by y, and outside the function, I'm calling the function divide. And now I haven't handled any exception. Now let's just try to run the code. As you can see, when I try running the code, it displays this long error message like from this file, in this line, in this module, like that. Now, when creating scalable applications, normally applications throw a custom message to the user, which would be division by zero is not possible. Kindly enter any other number other than zero, like that. Now let's try to handle this error. So in order to handle this error, we'll write try over here, and then we'll move this x, y, and this print statement inside the try block. And then I'll write except, then I'll write the name of the error. As you can see, the name of the error has been already displayed. So I'll just copy paste the error. So this error name is zero division error. And then I'll put a colon, and then I'll hit enter. Now inside this line, I will write which custom message should the user see. So I'll write print, and then I'll write um, division by zero is not possible. Kindly try again with another number. And then if I run my code, as you can see now it throws the custom message that we have set, which is division by zero is not possible. Kindly try again with another number. Now if I change the number from 0 to 1 or with any other number, the error will go. As you can see, it has divided and it shows the answer in as 5. Now this is how exception handling works. Now this is only one error, which is zero division error. Like that, there are many other errors in Python. So to get the exact name of the error, we can just try to run the code and it will automatically show. There, apart from the zero division error, there is another error called value error, which I explained before, is used to handle errors where the user enters incorrect data type, such as a user input required an integer data type, but the user accidentally entered a string data type. So at that time, we can use value error. So in order to handle the value error, we can use the same syntax. We can write try, and inside try we can specify the variables and the print statements we want. And inside that I can write except, then I can write value error, and then I can write print um, kindly enter an integer, like this. So by entering this, I can handle this exception, this value error exception. Now the challenge question is, handle a value error, and provide a custom error message to the user. Do paste the code in the comment section below. Now that's a wrap for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like this video, and share it with your friends and family. Thank you for watching this video.